Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Today our portion is Vaylishlach. And Mauricio, it's Mauricio who wrote this beautiful message, and he entitled it, How Long Until We Face Our Fears? The book of Job says, For what I fear has overtaken me, and what I dreaded has come upon me. I had no response, no quiet, no rest, and trouble came. In El Salvador, we say too much analysis generates paralysis. Overanalysis usually stems from an unresolved emotional burden blocking and preventing us from making good decisions and then taking action. Excessive analysis can lead us to doubt, to feel insecure, where we have too many options, we investigate too much, and we can sense an overload of emotions, and all that generates stress. Overthinking a problem generates adrenaline and gives off toxins in our body. Sometimes the problem is excessive perfectionism, and that doesn't allow us to go ahead because we want something to be too good, but then it's not functional. While I was reading this portion, I wondered if Yaakov was a young lad of 20 when he left home. Sometimes the timeline of Yaakov's life evades us when we're reading the Torah. Referencing certain scholars and sages and rabbis, we might conclude that Yaakov was only 15 years old when he purchased the birthright from his twin brother Esau. Now, the Torah recalls that event of these two children, but our sages tell us that they were 63 years old by then. They say that Esau was 40 when he decided to marry Ada and Ahalivama, two Canaanite women. They say he married his cousin Basmat, daughter of Ishmael, 23 years later, hoping to gain favor with his father when he realized that his parents couldn't stand his first two wives. Now they continue with, at 63 years of age, Esau was summoned by his father to receive the blessing. His mother Rivka was eavesdropping and advised her son, her favorite son, to usurp the blessing from Esau. Yaakov didn't make his own decisions. Rather, it suggests that at 63, he was still a child living behind his mother's skirts. Yaakov was still unmarried, living with his parents, no son, and living in tents, which is an expression which means he was a shepherd. He stayed close to home, taking care of the sheep. According to some scholars, he spent all day studying the Torah. The fact is that the Torah doesn't say that. Like when David quotes, the Tanakh quotes David when he said, Your Torah is by day and my meditation by night. That means it implies that Yaakov was a mama's boy. He didn't know what it meant to earn a living. He had no purpose and was comfortable with the single life. As a result of his deception, Yaakov wrongfully obtained the blessing. He didn't know how to wait for God's blessing, like Abraham, who decided to give Sarah a son through Hagar instead of waiting for God's promise that he would have a son through his wife Sarah. Yaakov's impulsiveness to seek the promises of God based upon his own strength and in his own time would lay the foundation for his future. 14 years later, Rebekah heard Esau threaten to kill his younger brother, which is when they decided that Yaakov should flee to his mother's house in Padan Aram. So at 77 years old, that's my age, Yaakov left his father's house for an unknown destination. So what if Yaakov didn't have the birthright? Wouldn't he have had the material and spiritual blessings of his father? Did he arrive in Padan Aram with nothing? According to the Midrashim, Eliphaz, son of Esau, tried to kill him, and instead of doing so, he left him alive, but just took away all his wealth. Now, regardless of how it happened, the Torah records that Yaakov arrived with just his staff in hand and without a penny to his name. So let's imagine a man accustomed to the good life, to having servants, arriving in an unknown place with foreign customs, and who must now earn his living by hard work. You know, there's an old film called The Last Emperor. It describes the life of the Emperor of China, Hui, when the monarchy of the Forbidden City fell to a communist regime. He ended up as a gardener in the botanical park. Here is a great lesson in humility. Today we may be up, but tomorrow we can be down. How many of us have lived through similar situations? That's why it's important to cultivate good and healthy relationships. We never know what the future holds for us. So Yaakov at 77 would now have to work hard over the next 20 years. How many people at 77 years of age want to begin working? Our sages calculate that he was 84 when he fell in love and got married. He was deceived again when his wife was exchanged for another. Within 13 years, he had fathered 11 boys and 1 girl. Now, at this age, he had to deal with 4 wives, 11 children, livestock, clients, employees, and on and on. It was 20 years of hardship with little spiritual growth. However, note that the blessing was Yaakov. The blessing was not outside himself, not external. It was within. It was inherent to his person. At 97 years old, yes, 97, Yaakov decided to return home. He had finally reached maturity. 97 for those of us who feel they're not mature at our age. But now he's faced with another turning point in his life. He realizes that for his future to be assured, he finally has to grow up. But this pushed him into a state of limbo. He knew if he stayed in Haran, his children would have no future and could potentially become like Esau or Ishmael. He knew that his children had to continue the promise given to his grandfather Abram and his father Isaac. But this change implied pain, opening a wound from his past. It's not true that time heals all wounds. Time only makes a wound rot and become infected, even to the point of gangrene, if we don't deal with it. The way to heal wounds is by suturing, cleansing, and healing them with medication. And that's exactly what happened. Yaakov realized that he needed to resolve his dark past so that the next generation could prosper. It's then that he heard the voice of the Eternal telling him to return home. But his return would not be easy. Can you imagine the mindset of a person at 97 who had to face his problems, who had not faced his problems? He had not dealt with his past mistakes. How could he face them and not lose his sanity? This trauma, so to speak, had been ignored until now. Yaakov had fled. He fled from his brother. He fled from his land. He fled from his father-in-law. It was time to say, no more running. Many of us tend to flee and evade the issues. But sooner or later, we will have to face a situation that we are running away from. How many people turn off their cell phones to avoid answering their creditors or quit their jobs because they can't stand the pressure? How many stop answering their ex-partner who wants to solve the problems that they're having with their children? How many stop visiting relatives with whom they've had arguments? Instead of solving the problems, they prefer to hide in the sand like the ostrich. He pretends that nothing's happening. We all have to face our past one day. To make matters worse, God sent his messengers to announce to Yaakov that his brother was coming to meet him. When faced with a difficult situation, we might cry out, "Oh God, eternal, why don't you send me something easier to deal with?" The medicine will not necessarily be the easiest. God sometimes sends us the biggest fish so we can learn how to fish. That's a very good thing to think about. Our portion begins with Yaakov sending angels or messengers before him. I want to highlight the medicine applied to Yaakov so it can help us resolve our past. First, we don't always necessarily have to face the person or situation head on. Does that mean we're not dealing with it? Well, here's an example. We have a car accident. Do we have to go to court ourselves? Or can we still be responsible by delegating someone else to deal with it in court for us? Whether it's an insurance company or a lawyer, a legal representative. This is different than running away and evading our responsibility. Or let's say I fought with my brother or sister. Why can't I use an intermediary like a mother or a cousin or an uncle? This strategy is one of softening the heart. It is announcing that we want to reconcile. We want to let go of the past. We just may need a little help. Second, it's not enough to send someone or anyone. We must be specific in what we are looking for, what we wish to convey, and what we hope to obtain as a result. Genesis 32 verse 5 says, "Thus you must say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob." Yaakov was clear that he desired to live in peace. But to achieve this, he had to convince Esau that he was sincere, that there was no deceit in his mouth, and that the Yaakov of 15 years of age and that also of 63 had been left behind, and that now, at the age of 97, he was a transformed man. Was that difficult? We have a saying here, if a tree is born crooked, the press cannot straighten it. But we know for the eternal, even at 97 years of age, we can be transformed and renewed. We read at the end of verse 6, "My Lord, I'm going to visit you in friendship to gain favor in your sight." Do you think Yaakov had ever spoken this clearly to Esau? I think not. His communication might have been informative, like in many families. We give information, but we don't speak about our intentions, our desires, our motives, our dreams. For example, we know the schedule of our children or our spouses, what they do, what time we have to pick them up. But is this information? Or are we really communicating? Do we know their dreams? Do we know who their friends are? What affinity they have with them? This poor communication can lead to misunderstandings and families separating. When we think we're doing everything right, more tests appear to bring out what's in our heart. When it says Esau is coming with 400 men, the cycle of fight or flight response is reactivated, as we read that Yaakov became very frightened and distressed. Of course, he was afraid of being killed or of having to use force to kill another living being. We begin to see that the answer always lies within Yaakov. Instead of acting impulsively, he stopped to think and analyzed his options. When confronting a problem, don't run. Calm down. Even if it's an earthquake or a fire, it's advisable to stop and think of options for evacuation. Now, Yaakov's brain took control of the situation and he analyzed it. First, he divided the camp in two, as we read in verse 8. Second, he begged God for help. Verse 10, Yaakov said to God. Third, he was aware of who he is. In verse 11, he said, I am not worthy of you and of your goodness. Fourth, he recognized what was happening to him, and he acted according to who he now was, as we read in verse 12. For I am afraid that he will come and attack me and my family, the mothers and my sons. Notice that he sincerely put first what worried him the most, although the order seems to be reversed. I believe that a good father would say, I'm afraid that he will attack my children, the mothers, my family, and then me. Fifth, arriving empty-handed after 20 years would not have been appropriate. So he sent the first gift divided into 4 separate droves, as we read in verses 14 to 15. Then he sent the second gift divided into 5 droves, verse 17. When you want to reconcile with another person, do you want them to just accept you for your pretty face? Try harder. Go and find something that would please them so that you may find favor in the eyes of that person that you offended. Finally, Yaakov had to deal with himself. Many people prefer to be constantly busy, filled with activities, so that they don't have to deal with themselves alone. They don't have to feel all alone. Yeshua said, go into your closet. In those days, it would have meant to put on his talit, to go within. Close the door. Pray to your Father in secret. That is, I must maintain inner dialogue. That's healthy. Yaakov's previous solutions were external. Gifts, dividing the camp, praying. But the most difficult part comes in verse 24. Yaakov was left alone. Once he was left alone, a man appeared. Some say it was Esau himself, others the angel of Esau. But Yaakov had to struggle with himself, with him, whoever it was, all night. Remember, at 97 years of age, he managed it all on his own. This man finally dislocated Yaakov's hip, leaving him with a limp. However, at dawn, with his last ounce of strength, Yaakov demanded that he not let him go until he blessed him. This was the turning point, because Yaakov said to Esau, with his fear personified, recognize the blessing that my father gave me and that my brother denied. Implicit are the words, bless me. But what is the blessing that he received? One would think that the blessing would not be to ask, what is your name? Honestly, I believe this was the blessing. Because when Yaakov asked, who are you? What is your name? The past instantly rushed back. And then Yaakov recognized that he was the one who had twisted things to get what he wanted, and that he had been the embodiment of trickery and deceit. Only then, by recognizing who he was he allowed to be granted a change of name. How many of us need a change of name today? Yaakov's name became Israel, and it means nobility, prince of God, the one who strives with God and prevails, who sees God, or who goes straight to God. Yaakov finally fought with his spiritual side and with men, Esau and Lavan, and he won. In the end, the man who did not appreciate his brother and who was now injured and walking with a limp bowed low between his brother 7 times. This softened his brother Esau's heart, who then saw a different Yaakov. He saw Israel. What is stopping us right now from moving forward? Are we stuck in our life? Do we have unhealthy relationships that need to be resolved? Remember that after this episode, Esau distanced himself, Yaakov distanced himself from Esau and reestablished his relationship with shalom, with peace. He knew that a close relationship with his brother Esau would not be appropriate. Likewise, reestablishing peace with another person does not necessarily mean that you have to live with this person again, especially if the personalities are incompatible. We must also be wise. So my prayer for us this Shabbat is that we move forward, that we become unblocked and not remain blocked, and that God's promises are fulfilled in each one of us. Shabbat Shalom.